morning. So today I have Brendon with us, who is a highly versatile learner who loves small companies and loves to get results. His most recent roles have focused on defining and implementing customer success best practices to early stage organizations, because the first step of a successful organization is to retain customers and get customers. So let's welcome Brendon on 10 Minutes of Hiring Wisdom, where he will tell us about what he has learned along the way and how we can utilize his learnings in our day-to-day lives. Hi, Brendon, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Thank you, Minal. I think that was a lovely overview. So yes, I've worked at a lot of small companies, and I've helped them build customer success programs and teams. And so naturally, I've had a lot of exposure to hiring. I've probably hired close to 40 people over the course of my
Wow.
career, and I've interviewed hundreds, if not more. So I feel like hopefully I know a thing or two about what interviewers are looking for, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Of course. So, Brendon, can you tell us about where you work, what your role is within the company?
Yeah, certainly. So I actually just started a new role in the last couple of weeks as head of customer success at a company called Datasembly, which is kind of a SaaS company in the data space. It's on the smaller side, about 80 employees, but rapidly growing. And I'm working on building a process and a team.
Okay. And when you mentioned that you're working on building a process, according to you, what makes a hiring process successful? Because these days, a lot of companies tend to lose on good employees because the process is so long. Sometimes recruiters end up ghosting on potential candidates. So, according to you, what are some of the best practices that companies could take in order to retain different candidates while making sure that the process is smooth as possible?
Yeah, so very good question. First and foremost, I would say it needs to be well defined. Every candidate needs to have a very similar experience. It needs to be turnkey, and it needs to be swift and seamless. I think a lot of and potential employers lose out because they're slow. They're slow on the scheduling front. They get somebody to the second or third round, and now the next round is with somebody who has got a full calendar and they're booked out for 4 days. And so I think making sure that the process is very aligned to moving people through in a quick and seamless fashion, and that you're scheduling ahead of time. Maybe you're preemptively blocking certain people if things are going well, so that you've already got a slot on their calendar, can go a really long way. I think it's also very important that the roadmap for hiring is transparent to the candidate. They know exactly what to expect, and that the timeline for them isn't ambiguous as well, particularly because they could be having other conversations. And it's important that they know, okay, I can expect to, be fully through the process in, say, 2 weeks if everything goes well.
Okay, and you mentioned that you should be transparent as much as you can with the candidate. Usually, a lot of companies aren't as transparent. What are some of the drawbacks when companies might not be as transparent with candidates?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, you could lose potential interest from that candidate, right? Because for a lot of job seekers, they're looking for transparency. And the early experiences that they have during the interview process very much form their opinion of your org and what they can expect if they were to work there. And so, if it's ambiguous, opaque, if they're not getting the information and the answers that they think they deserve, that's very much going to count against you, particularly if you find yourself in a bake-off where there's other prospective people who are orgs who want to hire this employee. So be setting expectations clearly from the front, and just very much illuminating what the process is going to look like can go a really long way in enhancing the candidate's experience, making them feel comfortable with the process with the org, and that you're structured, you're organized, and that you're going to be forthright about what they can expect here and even beyond if they were to come work for you.
Okay, sounds good. And you mentioned previously that you've hired over 50 people and you've interviewed over 100 plus people. What was something about those 40 people that made them stand out and caused you to hire them as opposed to the 100 people that you interviewed? What were some of the things that stood out about them as opposed to the candidates that were not selected?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I tend to focus really heavily on fit. Experience is secondary. And so for me, I want to have a conversation with someone who knows what they want. If I a really big important part of that is when I ask you, why do you want to work here? You need to have a compelling narrative that convinces me, that our company and our role is a good fit for you. And I think the candidates who are most effectively able to communicate that message and convince me that they are a good fit are the ones that are going to stand out and rise above. Maybe you've got gaps in your experience. You don't check all those boxes. Great for you've already passed the initial screen. Chances are we're somewhat comfortable with the fact that we could teach you what we need to know, what you need to know. But I'll take fit over experience any day of the week.
Okay, but some candidates, for instance, might not be good communicators, can't effectively communicate that they might have a narrative that would fit your company. What are some tips that you would give to those candidates to make sure that they can deliver their message effectively?
Yeah. So, and I completely understand that. I understand that there's a lot of people out there that are better employees than they are interviewees. And so I'm sympathetic to that. And I do try to identify that a little bit during the interview process. First and foremost, I think even if you're not, super, comfortable in an interview setting, it's really important that you treat it as a two-way street. That you are, it also feels like you are interviewing that candidate, that interviewer, and the prospective employer. You're asking thoughtful questions. It's, you're demonstrating that you've done your homework, that you're taking this very seriously. And so even if maybe some of your answers, you don't nail, you're able to send a message that this is really important to you. And for me, I love a candidate who really wants the job and is able to very effectively convey that.
Okay. Usually, I'd love to understand your perspective because usually I've read so many articles in which if a candidate comes across too needy, sometimes recruiters back off because they're like, oh, why does this candidate not have other options? So, how do you create that fine line between showing that you're not too needy, but you also want the role?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you want to be direct and deliberate, but not at the expense of looking desperate. And so, if you ask me thoughtful questions that show you've done your homework, that's a great way to communicate that, hey, like I'm taking this really seriously, but without, saying, please, please, please hire me. And so I oftentimes look for those more indirect signals, not just, hey, I really want to work here. Okay. I mean, anybody can say that, but can you convince me of that in the interview process? And a lot of that boils down to your actions and your knowledge, and not just during the interview, but what I can infer about how you prepared for the interview.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Brandon. My last question for you would be you've started this new position and everything, and you mentioned that your company is growing. So, what are some of the open positions that you would be actively hiring for so that if people are listening to this, they know what to apply for and where to apply to?
Yeah, so we are hiring in a lot of different realms right now. Admittedly, I'm new enough that I probably couldn't tell you all of those realms. But if you go to datasembly.com, just like it sounds, you can see those roles. I am not hiring just yet. We just hired somebody just as I started. We will be hiring, expanding the team quite a bit next year in 2022. But we have roles open in various parts of the org, and we'll be growing pretty aggressively next year as well. So even if you don't see something that's a good fit, that could certainly change in the next couple months.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Last thing, Brandon. What is something that you've learned along your career journey that would be useful for job seekers out there?
Hmm. Um, that's a good one. I can't say I'm prepared to answer that. Here's one thing that I will say. Be authentic. I know it's really easy to not want to be your true self in an interview. But somebody once told me, like, you don't misrepresent yourself, because then they could be hiring somebody that you're not. And I think it's really important that you get to demonstrate who you are and what you have on offer, not who you want to be, or not a certain image that you really want to portray. Yes, bring your best self, and obviously you want to control that image a little bit. But I think it's really important to find a company who wants to hire you for you.
Okay, well, you heard it from Brandon, who has had a successful career so far. That is to be authentic and be yourself, because at the end of the day, what you bring to the company based on your personality is something that would make you successful. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on the show, for sharing about your wonderful insights. And I wish that your new job at your new company turns out to be wonderful and you learn as much as you can. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Minal. Appreciate you having me.